Welcome to the third session in our series, Update on Israel with Avi Ben-Hur. Today's session will continue to address the ever-changing landscape of the conflict in Israel. Over the past 3 weeks, we've seen significant developments in the region that could potentially reshape the course of this complex and long-standing conflict. For those of you that are new to our virtual events, I am Ellen Resnick, the Educational Programs and Outreach Manager at Classrooms Without Borders. In the past 3 years alone, we have hosted over 470 programs with close to 76,000 participants from 58 countries and almost all of the United States. If you would like to donate to support our mission, I will drop the link into the chat for you in just a moment. Today, our goal is to provide you with an update on the most recent events, their implications, and the international response, all with the focus on promoting understanding and constructive dialogue. We understand the sensitivity and complexity of this topic, and we're here to facilitate a respectful and informative discussion. Now, I'd like to introduce Avi Ben-Hur, CWB's Jerusalem-based scholar in residence, who has been with the CWB from our founding and has led many of our educational seminars for educators to Poland, Israel, Greece, Germany, among others. Avi is both an expert on the history of Israel and the Arab-Israeli conflict and is uniquely placed to deliver an on-the-ground view of this while it is taking place in Israel at this moment. Together with our team here in Pittsburgh, Avi has been putting together curriculum and educational materials to facilitate a rich, fact-based discussion on what is happening in Israel since October 7th. Your input and questions are invaluable, so please feel free to participate in our upcoming Q&A session. You will drop your questions in the chat to Avi directly. And with that, Avi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ellen. Welcome, everybody. It's about 8:05 here in Jerusalem, where I'm speaking to you from. Well, let's start with something that's not so pleasant. I live 2 city blocks from Mount Herzl. Mount Herzl is where we have our national pantheon. Leaders of the nation are buried there. But we also have a national military cemetery. And in the last 24 hours or so, it's been a lot of activity. Well, I should say, more bluntly, there's a traffic jam right up my street on a regular basis because of soldiers that have been killed. In the last 24 hours, we've had 15 soldiers killed in the ongoing operation taking place in the Gaza Strip. I think 100% of them were killed, attacked by anti-tank missiles. So, which is, I mean, all of them, which is kind of astounding. A lot of battles taking place. Hundreds of Hamas terrorists have been killed, but this is the reality that we're living in right now. So I just wanted to start with that, just so we understand what's going on. So what has happened up to this moment? Up till now, in the last 3 weeks, we've had, since the events of October 7th to 12th, we've had Israel doing some significant bombing in Gaza Strip. And just about 5 days ago, we began to enter in the so-called land maneuver into the Gaza Strip with our forces. We called up a very large reserve force. 360,000 people were called up. It's not our entire reserve, but it's quite a lot. And as I said, we're making some headway. Our troops are the entrance to Gaza City, already deep in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, but not in the tunnels, evidently. Big drama a few days ago in maybe the first incursion that we did in the Gaza Strip. We managed to rescue a female soldier, really healthy, and that was amazing, while killing her captors. So that was, let's say it was uplifting for people here. It was the first good news we've had in the last 3.5 weeks. But as you probably are aware, the numbers of captives held in terms of what our knowledge base is keeps going up. The last number was 240. And I'm reminding you that when it was 230, we had 4 released, and we just rescued another one. Now we're up to 240. What that tells us is we don't really know the exact number of hostages or captives being held by Hamas and all kinds of associated groups with them. In addition to the bombing and being on the receiving end of a lot of missiles, including today in parts of Israel, all in the center of the country. Yesterday, we had a barrage in Jerusalem as well. In addition to all that, we also had some interesting activity coming from much, much further south. The Houthis, which are a Shiite, Yemenite, autonomous. They basically broke away and been fighting a civil war in Yemen for several years now. They're backed by Iran. And it may ring a bell for a lot of you because it's I think 2-3 years ago they succeeded in shooting missiles and destroying some oil rigs oil fields actually belong to the Saudis. So they have power. They've been shooting in the last 5-6 days missiles and a whole slew of drones, explosive drones, in Israel's direction. The initial attacks were actually taken care of by U.S. Navy, which is also down in the area. In the last 24 hours, we shot down incoming missiles and drones. Incoming missile was shot down by the Arrow system, which is an Israeli-American system that is designed to take down intercontinental ballistic missiles. It's long range. It's actually designed to deal with incoming nuclear warheads. And if you want to know why we use the Arrow system to deal with this and not, let's say, Iron Dome or Magic Wand, the answer is that Yemen is pretty far away. And I mean, they're shooting this stuff very accurately, but from pretty far away. They also shot towards us over Saudi territory. The Saudis shot down some missiles, so that's interesting. And the last, I think, 24 hours, the Houthis also killed 4 Saudi soldiers. So things are heating up in the south. And we're going to talk about that front a little bit later on today. Now, having said everything I've said, that our troops are already in the Gaza Strip. We've been doing a lot of bombing. We managed to rescue 1 person. 4 people have been released. We're not really closer to any of our purported stated goals, meaning A, to completely take away Hamas's offensive capabilities. We've damaged some of them, but the truth is that we haven't done significant damage. They're having less rocket barrages shot towards us and less accurate. That's true. That's about it. And the goal of toppling the regime, we're nowhere near close to that. And of course, we're nowhere near close to retrieving hostages that they're holding in their hands. So one can make the argument that we're 3.5 weeks into this, we really haven't advanced very far. We're also in this war more time than we were in the Yom Kippur War. I'm just putting it out there just so we have an understanding of that. And I think no less significant, everything I just said up till now is that the Israeli public confidence in their personal safety and security and the national security has not been restored yet. Okay, so this is just a kind of a kaleidoscopic overview of where we are right now at this moment. I'm not being critical. I'm putting things out there where they are. This is what we have to this moment, okay, and that's a reality. Let's talk about foreign presence in our region. Foreign military presence, as you probably know, the United States has 2 aircraft carrier strike forces in the area. They've also moved something like 2,500 Marines into the area. The United States has been bolstering up a lot of its missile defense systems all over the region, meaning in Iraq, in Syria, in Saudi Arabia probably, and certainly in Jordan. And a lot of it, they've also brought in a very, very large amount of fighter planes. Most of the U.S. array appears right now to be facing in 2 directions. One is towards Iran, and the other one is towards the Houthis. Okay? In other words, the United States appears to be spreading kind of an umbrella, defensive umbrella, on Saudi Arabia to a certain extent, and a kind of a, not offensive, but a kind of a warning array towards Iran. So, and it's not, obviously some of this also is in our defense, in Israel's defense, but I would say that the U.S. systems are going to be coordinated with the Israeli systems, let's put it that way. So this is very, very significant. Germany has sent some warships that are also arrayed similarly. The British have sent also some troops and some warships. So it's very interesting because it appears to be a kind of a multinational force is arraying in the area. The French have been talking but haven't done very much as far as I know in this context. So this is important, I think, for all of us to be aware of that. And it's very clear the United States is very interested in not getting dragged into a regional war, yet another war in the Middle East, but is also aware of the stakes of what's going on here. And of course, Iran is playing quite a dangerous game, and we'll talk again a little bit more about that in a bit. Let's talk about the Houthis. So evidently, the Houthis have maybe as many as 500,000 militants. They've been fighting now for several years. They've got some very good, sophisticated weaponry, specifically surface-to-air missiles, surface-to-surface missiles, a lot of drones, and they've been using these very, very effectively against the Saudis. The Saudis were fighting them for several years, basically to a standstill. It's kind of dramatic that Saudi Arabia, with all the U.S. aid and the wealth of the kingdom and all the very sophisticated U.S. Military equipment, was not able to tamp down on Houthi attacks against them. The bottom line, the Houthis are on the one hand, a proxy of Iran, yet another proxy, just like Hezbollah, that Iran is using to make particularly Sunni regimes in the area, but also now they're trying for the first time with Israel to make us bleed a little bit. They're pretty far away from us, and while we don't perceive them as a significant threat, they can cause some damage to our shipping lines with the weaponry. And thus far, Israel has chosen not to respond directly. We're a little bit busy right now with the Gaza Strip, with stuff that's been going on with Hezbollah in the north, flare-ups in the West Bank. So we have other things on our plates, but I presume at some point, and not too distant future, we're probably going to turn our attention towards the Houthis and deal with that threat as well. I think what's interesting is that we're finding ourselves allied with the Saudis unofficially. We're on the same side of this because they're on the receiving end of a lot of what the Houthis were doing for years, and also in the last few days. So, so are some of the countries like the United Arab Emirates. So that's also interesting. And we do have actually relations with them, part of the Abraham Accords. So Iran is actually succeeding in creating a coalition against their proxies and against them, pushing the U.S., Israel, Saudi Arabia, and some of the Gulf states together, which is kind of an interesting way of looking at it as well. But the Houthis can make some trouble. Again, they're not an existential threat for Israel, and I'm not really sure how much they're interested in Israel. They're interested in causing trouble in their particular region, which is not where we are. Let's talk a little bit about the home frontier. One of the issues I think that has not gotten a lot of probably press in your neck of the woods is what's been happening with the Israeli hospitals. So I'm sure you're aware of the fact that the south of the country received and has been receiving the brunt of the missiles and rockets that Hamas has been shooting at us since the 7th of October. By the way, the number as of 10 o'clock this morning was 8,500 rockets or missiles, okay, since the 7th of October. We have two major hospitals that are located in the south. One is in Beersheba, which is the largest Israeli city in the south, university town. And the other one is in Ashkelon, which is mid-sized city from Israeli standards, not by American standards, but about 150,000 people living in Ashkelon. Beersheba has about double that, but Ashkelon's got about 150,000, and there's a hospital there, and the hospital's been hit with 3 rockets. The hospital in Ashkelon, in contrast to Beersheba, is not well fortified in the event of these kinds of missile attacks. They've been begging the country for years to get fortified, to get upgraded. And there was some kind of upgrade after the fighting in 2014, but not enough. Still something like, I think 70% of the hospital is not really prepared to receive missiles. When I say that sentence, it sounds like, what do you mean a hospital prepared to receive missiles? So just FYI, we have two major hospitals and one minor hospital, two in the north and one in the center of the country, that have huge underground fortified facilities. This is true of the Rambam Hospital in Haifa, which is one of the larger hospitals in the country. Their entire underground parking lot is completely fortified. I mean, you have like huge surgery operations down. You have like a huge array under the ground. Nahariya, which is very close to the Lebanese border, also has their entire underground parking lot was outfitted years ago, and is really can sustain a lot of missiles and still operate. And the Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem also has deep under the ground a lot of facilities. In all three cases, they can also operate if there's a chemical attack. I'm just sharing that with you. The Barzilai Hospital in Ashkelon, which has already received 3 rockets and sustained significant damage, has none of the above. Doesn't have what I just talked about. They have a fortified area that was set up a few years ago, which again constitutes around 30%. This is going to sound nuts what I'm going to say now, but they managed to get, when the fighting started, they moved all of the women who were supposed to give birth, like now, tomorrow, whatever, and people who were just given birth, they shifted them, all of them, into the protected area, and literally 5 minutes after they'd gotten everybody down there, a rocket had hit the area that they had the women were. And so yeah, they're operating, I think, at 30% in terms of the amount of people that they can actually bring in. It must be obvious to you that a lot of the casualties are going first and foremost to Beersheba and Ashkelon because they're the closest to the front in the Gaza Strip. So the Barzilai one is not, it's functioning, but it's not where it should be. And I'm just going to put this parenthetically in brackets. This also relates to the communities that were in the Gaza envelope, the 22 communities that were attacked and destroyed or partially destroyed. The state did not invest enough in those areas. It was known. It was an issue for years, and it's coming to roost right now. It may be interesting to hear that we actually have I don't know how to quantify it. I don't know the quantity, the numbers, but we have a significant number of Jewish and non-Jewish doctors from abroad who have come to volunteer, and they're bolstering the medical staff in the hospitals. I want to add something parenthetically, something that some of you are aware of and some of you are not aware of. Something to the tune of 30% of all doctors in Israel are Arab Israelis. Much higher percentage, maybe 44% of the nurses, male and female, are Arab Israelis. By the way, 40% of the pharmacists, but I'm putting that aside for a second. And of course, everybody's reporting to duty. I'm saying that because this is important. So again, we are seeing volunteers coming from abroad, and it's quite heartening. We're talking about Jewish and non-Jewish doctors that have been coming in. What's going on outside of Israel in terms of support or the lack thereof? So Russia now is, I think, if Russia was kind of on the fence, so to speak, a week and a half ago, Russia is clearly pro-Palestinian now, is accusing the United States and the West for this war at large, for the atrocities taking place in the Gaza Strip. Okay, and Israel is, of course, a proxy and a puppet of the U.S. and the West. This is Russia, those terrific human rights activists. China is officially sitting on the fence, but what's really almost bizarre is that there's a lot of traffic on the internet in China that's anti-Semitic. I have to stop you for a second because this is bizarre. Your average Chinese person in China, not in the United States, wouldn't know what a Jew is if a Jew fell on their face off a tree and knocked them over the head. They wouldn't know what a Jew is. Okay, this is not part of their history. Anti-Semitism is not part of Chinese tradition. It has nothing to do with them. It's just bizarre. But the Chinese are, of course, sitting on the fence. China's for China. And anything can undermine the United States from a Chinese perspective is, I guess, good for China. Moving to South America, Bolivia has officially cut off relations with Israel. Chile and Colombia have called back their ambassadors, all their envoys from Israel. That's a first step to cutting off relations. Jordan has called back its ambassador. Okay, it recalled its ambassador. But officially, and you can see it in terms of the military aid we've gotten, US, Canada, UK, France, Germany, Czech Republic, Austria, Greece, Italy, the EU at large are officially supportive of Israel. And that's, I think it's important to say that I'm talking about the countries and their governments. I'm not talking about what's going on in terms of their citizens and what they think about. Okay. There's been a lot of dialogue in Israel, and I suppose some of it may be spilling over to the United States. I'm not really sure. You probably know better than I do about calling this a Holocaust or referencing the Holocaust or this kind of stuff. With your permission, I'm going to weigh in on this issue. I'm going to do it not because I'm sitting in Jerusalem and Israel, and not because I'm sitting 2 city blocks from Yad Vashem, Israel's National Holocaust Memorial and Museum, but because I've been a Holocaust scholar for the last 28 years. This has nothing to do with the Holocaust. We have agency. We have a very powerful army. We were wounded, and we're fighting back. And we're going to make them hurt, and we're going to get our people back. And we're a strong country, and we're strong people. Yes, we were wounded. Yes, they did a lot of damage to us, but we're not the story of the 1930s and 1940s. We're a strong country. We're also getting support by the most important superpower in the world, the United States, and not just the United States, as I mentioned before. It's not the same thing. Okay, we have to be very, very cautious and careful about that discourse. I think that is the wrong analogy. I think the better analogy really is 9/11, and also maybe a pogrom, okay, because of the actual details. Is Hamas and Islam Jihad Nazi-like? The answer is yes, in terms of lack of respect of life, in terms of how anti-Semitic and what they think about Jews at large, and not just Israelis, yes. But Israel's not facing Nazi Germany right now, and this is not the Holocaust. And I'm saying that not from any kind of place of arrogance, but I think from a place of consciousness and also reality. We are a powerful country, and we are hitting them back. Okay, and this is a reality on the ground. Okay, so moving back to here, in Israel, we haven't heard officially of some kind of grand strategy or goals and aims of this war from the Israeli government. And here I'm being very specific about the end game. Because let's be honest, let's say for sake of argument, we succeed in dramatically degrading Hamas's offensive capabilities, let's say for years. Let's say for sake of argument, we even manage to topple the regime there. Who replaces Hamas? Who's going to say that ISIS doesn't replace them or something even worse? Who's stepping in? What is that going to look like? How do we actually create a significant deterrence there? Who takes care of the Gazan people, the 2.5 million people there? How does that work? As far as I understand, Israel at large doesn't have a plan yet. And this is a huge, huge problem. Just so you understand, this is interesting. There are some voices in the Israeli government, not necessarily senior, but there are some voices, and there are all kinds of pundits that are talking about the idea that the Palestinian Authority, the PA, which is autonomous in the West Bank, will move to take over in lieu of, instead of Hamas, once we get rid of them. let's make something very, very clear. The present Israeli government has, not secretly, has officially moved in the last 11 months to weaken the Palestinian Authority. The Minister of Finance, Bezalel Smotrich, said it declaratively and was refusing to transfer taxes to the PA that belong to them, that we hold. And now during the war, he's doing more of the same. So even if there are some people in the Israeli government who think that it might be a good idea to enable the PA to take over, the Palestinian Authority to take over afterwards, we have other people in the government who are working at odds with that kind of goal. And this is important to understand. The PLO, the PA are not they're not our, they don't work for us, okay? And it's simply not going to work if we continue to weaken them, and that's something kind of a no-brainer. Something else, the economy. So 360,000 reservists. These are people who are not in the standing army. These people, most of whom, maybe all of them, have jobs. Now, there's only 9.8 million citizens of Israel, and we have a very young population. That means that 360,000 people is significant, who are not working, is a significant blow to the Israeli economy. So we actually have, for the first time now, since this began, the Israeli Central Bureau of Statistics came out with stats about what's been going on with the economy. So the report that came out today was that 50% of the businesses nationally have recorded a loss of 50% of their revenue or income, okay? And 11% of all Israeli companies have reported that 20% of their employees are in reserves. I'm sharing this with you because this is the reality. One of the reasons that Israel cannot afford to wage lengthy wars, in addition to the obvious one that we all know, which is that the clock is ticking in terms of the international community, how much support we'll get from the international community, how much support we get from the United States in every war. There's another issue, and the issue is we cannot sustain a lengthy war because of the damage it does nationally to our economy. So already we are starting to feel that pain, starting 3.5 weeks into this, with no end in sight. I don't mean to the pain, I'm talking about to the war. I'm not here to give you good news. I want to be honest. This is not part of what I'm doing here. I'm trying to be as honest, straightforward, and transparent as possible. So I'm reflecting what we're seeing here. And it's not a reflection from my personal perspective. This is reading 5, 6 newspapers and watching the news and putting that all together for you. And also, obviously, what I see, talking to people. The government, what's happened is that the security establishment is back on its feet properly. The army is doing what it's supposed to do. The Shin Bet is doing what it's supposed to do. Everybody's awake now. Nobody's complacent. We couldn't have rescued a female soldier without any harm to her while killing her captors like we did 3 days ago if we weren't back on our feet again. Okay, I want to be very, very clear to all of you. And a poll that came out today showed that the Israeli public right now has a lot more faith in the security establishment, and it's still not at all retrieved any of its faith in the government. Part of that has to do with the fact the government has not been very functional till now. A lot of bickerings going on between the ministers themselves, and there's a lot of politicking going on. And the sense is nationally, this is the wrong time for it. This is not the time when this kind of war for them to be pulling this stuff. And this is obviously in the polls that came out today showing that the popularity of the government at large and the faith in government is at a nadir. It's really, really at a dramatic low point. And I wanted to share that with you as well. Last but not least, and then I'm going to take a look at the questions that have been coming in. How do Israelis here perceive what's happening to you there? Let me reframe the question. How do Israelis, generally speaking, those who are aware of it, perceive the rise in anti-Semitism in Europe, in North America, in Turkey, by the way, and the concomitant rise of anti-Israel and pro-Hamas / pro-Palestinian demonstrations, again, in North America, in South America, in Europe, and of course, what's happening in the so-called progressive left intellectual classes and on the campuses. So, first of all, it has to be said that many Israelis are horrified. In the wake of what Hamas did, it is simply unbearable and unbelievable for most Israelis what's happening on the campuses. The rise of anti-Semitism is also something that is depressing. And regarding the anti-Israel and pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas, I should say, demonstrations we're seeing all over the world, I think that many Israelis are getting a sense that the numbers are larger than they actually are. In other words, from my personal vantage point of what I'm looking at, I think there's a silent majority that is not demonstrating against Israel in all these countries. And when I look at the people who are demonstrating, I'm seeing a very specific demographic or several specific demographics that are associated with that. And I'm not getting the impression that those demonstrations are having a lot of impact on the countries that are supportive of Israel to date. Okay, the jury's still out, obviously, but to date, that's my impression as I'm trying to track this very, very carefully. In the campuses, it's a long conversation. And those who are sitting in North America, I have to tell you that from my vantage point here, if that's what the academy looks like, you're in dire straits. I'm not saying with any kind of relish at all. I'm going to start dive into your questions now and try to answer them one by one. Bernie's asking me if there's any political interest in this disaster leading to a political accommodation or solution. Accommodation was my term. And he said two-state solution with peace. Look, Bernie, the last public opinion polls that took place, and a joint poll was done between Palestinian pollsters and Israeli pollsters, and it took place last December 2022. It was called the Palestine-Israel Pulse, and they started taking these joint polls in 2016. Very serious stuff. The poll in 2022, and I actually sat with the Palestinian pollster in Ramallah with a group that I was guiding. But I've already seen the whole report on his website and the Tel Aviv University website, and essentially less than 50% of Israelis and Palestinians were for a two-state solution, and that's last December for this war, and the numbers had been declining clearly in the last 3-4 years. Well, I should say since 2018. There's been clear decline. Now, your question was, Bernie, can this disaster, or is it generating dialogue about this? The answer is no. Okay. Can it potentially generate a two-state solution with peace? I don't know. My gut feeling is, unless it's imposed on the sides, the answer is no. And the reason my gut feeling is that is my sense is that Israelis will be shifting further to the right in the wake of these events. And there are also significant factions or parties on both sides of the conflict that are dead set against the two-state solution, both in the present Israeli government and also in among the Palestinians. And I really don't see that's what's going to emerge. But also, one has to understand something very basic, and then I'm going to move on. At least from this point right now, the Palestinian Authority is very weak, very unpopular, very dysfunctional, and very corrupt. How you would change that overnight is beyond my ken. And having begun to talk about senior ministers in the Israeli government that are publicly against any Palestinian state anywhere between the river and the sea, and that declaratively, and doing their utmost to ensure that that's not going to happen. Abby's asking, I said Hamas being less accurate, is that because their power electricity has been cut off, or it's not related? It's not related to the power. Electricity has nothing to do with their capacity to fire rockets, projectiles, and missiles at us. It has to do with the pounding they've been taking from the air, and also the fact that Israeli troops are in there. We'll be more accurate in taking out. We've been taking out a lot of the launching pads as well. I think that's the issue. Abby's also asking about the use of sleeping gas in the tunnels. Look, folks, we estimate, and it's a very broad estimation, there are at least 500 miles of tunnels that are networking the entire Gaza Strip. Some of these tunnels can be, I don't know, 40 stories under the ground, 50 stories under the ground. Gas is not going to be the solution, evidently. So Nomi's asking, hi Nomi. Nomi's asking if I think that the mainstream U.S. media, whether it's the press or TV or cable, what have you, are covering all that's going on in the area. I think that they're covering a lot, but listen, other stuff happens around the world. You had this disaster in Maine 2 days ago, so that, for obvious reasons, and shunted some of Israel off the headlines for some time, like it should have. And things are happening, well, obviously in the States and other parts of the world, and I suspect that's also going to be happening as well. I think that just like with the war, Ukraine and Russia, it was on everybody's news feeds for quite some time, and then it got shunted off by other things. And it's going to happen. It'll happen here as well. That's very dramatic things are happening. So yeah, I think that they're doing a decent job in the States. There are, I think the last count, some kind of crazy number of, I think, thousands of journalists in Israel right now covering this. I don't mean thousands from the US, I'm talking about globally, around the world. But yeah, I think you're getting, I'm also checking out all the time not everything, but a lot of the US news feeds, and you're getting a lot of information, some of it more accurate than others. Bob's asking me, in my opinion, do I think other countries will join the invasion? The invasion into the Gaza Strip, the answer is no. I do not see other countries joining in. I don't envision that. Honestly, I don't think they're going to be boots on the ground, aside from Israeli boots on the ground, in terms of facing Hamas. I don't think that's the case. I think that potentially, if the region erupts, we will see something happening here. I think that a U.S.-led coalition is going to tamp down on an Iranian-led proxy war. And not the United States wants to do that, but I think the stakes will be too high not to. And the U.S. will do everything it can to deter Iran and Hezbollah, but mistakes can be made. And the United States and others can get dragged into this against what they want, against their will. It's happened before. I don't know. I'm not a prophet. I don't know. I know the United States is arrayed and keeps sending more and more equipment. As I mentioned before, there's a lot of missile defense systems that they're setting up in Jordan and in Syria, and in Iraq, and they're trying to protect the bases. The bases have been under attack, and their ships have been under attack. The United States is doing what it needs to do, but it's also a raid in a way that can also be beneficial to Israel, not just as a deterrent, but also if we do get massive shooting of missiles from Hezbollah in the north. I suspect the United States will step in at least with shooting down some of those missiles. Probably not offensively, but will probably help in defense of Israel. I suspect. I don't know. Nobody's talking to me and telling me that, but that's my gut feeling. Susan's asking, are Israelis supportive of Netanyahu, Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, continuing to head the government during the war? Great question. The poll that came out today shows that I think overall 60-something% don't want him to resign during the war. Okay, so that's the answer to your question. But obviously different people feel differently about that, but that's the majority right now. So Susan is asking again, actually the IDF spokesman broadcast that one of the main Hamas operation centers is located beneath the main hospital in Gaza City, and showed a lot of photographs and evidence to prove it. She was asking, what can Israel do about it? Not a whole heck of a lot right now, or let's put it this way. We're not going to bomb the hospital. When Islamic Jihad accidentally bombed their own hospital parking lot and some tens of people got killed, Israel was blamed, and the world immediately accepted this blame, with the exception of the United States and one or two other countries. Said that Israel had bombed the hospital and killed 500, 800, whatever the number of people was, which again, we know now is not the number, and Israel didn't do it. So no, Israel is not gung-ho about bombing hospitals. I would say, to your question, Susan, and this is to everybody to hear very carefully, I think that Israel is highly aware of the humanitarian disaster as it's unfolding and what it's going to do to support for Israel. And so we are being more proactive in facilitating the humanitarian corridors. We are trying to be as cautious and careful as we can. Now, we have an ethical code in the Israel Defense Forces, okay? And we're not Hamas, and we try to fight war ethically, because war is an unethical endeavor, as you know. War is about killing other people and destroying, but we do the best we can to do it as morally and ethically and according to the laws of humanitarian, the international rules and laws of war, as per the Geneva Convention of 1949, and so on and so forth. Having said that, we're being extra careful from this point forward because of what happened at the hospital that we didn't cause before. And so I don't see us bombing that hospital, but I can imagine, given the proper intel and the opportunity, I could see us do an incision, kind of try an operation to take them out. They're probably, I can imagine they're also captives being held there as well. Jennifer's saying that it's challenging to respond to those who cite the Palestinian civilian casualties and the suffering of the people of Gaza as evidence of Israeli crimes and culpability. Can I comment on how you should respond? Okay. between October 7th and October 10th. Listen carefully what you said right now, please, because in Israel and abroad, October 7th is the catchphrase. But I know that it took us 3 days to regain control over the 22 Israeli communities that were assaulted by Hamas. And there were firefights, and we were still fighting them, and they were holding families hostage in a lot of those kibbutzim, a lot of those communities for those 3 days, continued to kill people and abuse them. And so for me, it's from the 7th of October to the 10th of October. I'll remind you, factually now, chronologically, we didn't take offensive action beyond our borders until we had cleaned out the area or purified the area of terrorists, the best of our knowledge. And it took us 3 days. It's only after that we began to bomb in the Gaza Strip. That's number one. Number two, I cannot envision any country in the world, be it democratic or not democratic, having 1,400 and counting, by the way, mostly civilians, massacred, raped, tortured, burnt alive, and some, at this point again, at least 240 people dragged out of your country to a foreign place against their will. I cannot imagine, and given proportions as well, I cannot imagine any normal country, functional country, not reacting, okay, very, very forcefully, and at least as forcefully as Israel has acted up to this moment. United States of America, 9/11, close to 3,000 people were murdered by Al-Qaeda. The U.S. response was, for better or for worse, actually we'll all probably agree now for worse, but the U.S. response was to invade and conquer 2 countries in the Middle East, well, one in Central Asia, the other one in the Middle East, Afghanistan and Iraq. Many, many, many people died. Many civilians died. Okay. And I would say neither of those endeavors, I think we all agree, was actually ended up being a big success story for the United States. Okay. But look what the US did with 9/11. As President Biden said, when you look proportionately to Israel's population and the US population, what happened to us on October 7th, actually, is something like 10 to 15 times 9/11 in the United States. Hamas came in, and in their own admission, this is the thing, folks, here there's no fake news. Here there's no room for any kind of confusion. And the simple reason is Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and their hangers-on filmed all this stuff deliberately, and then deliberately uploaded this stuff to social media as part of their psychological warfare, as their next stage of fighting against us. Us meaning us in Israel, us Jews as well. Their own films show they even tortured and murdered a Thai laborer who is not Jewish, not Israeli, not part of the conflict, happened to be a laborer there. So there's nothing here. There's nothing counterfactual to that. Okay, the reality is they bragged about it. Not only did they film this stuff, but we also captured of dead Hamas their plans. We captured some live Hamas people and interrogated them, and they have interrogations said exactly what they were planned to do. There's no room for any kind of question about the facts. The facts are that they mass murdered people, they mass raped people, they murdered children in front of their parents, parents in front of their children, octogenarians, nonagenarians, what you name it. They burnt people alive, and this was done deliberately, planned. That, by the way, when you put that together with their charter, that is the definition of genocide, because genocide is based on intent. Israel has zero interest in maximizing innocent Gazans' death. Zero interest. We have nothing to gain from it, only to lose. We have maximum interest in getting our captives back and in taking out as many of these terrorist maniacs as we possibly can, and to take away the capacity from harming us again. Any normal country would do what we're doing. Okay. Now the question is, what is the smart way to do it? And here, I don't have great answers. All of Israel's choices are bad choices. And somebody says otherwise is either doesn't understand the situation, or they are not have no empathy or sympathy what Israel's going through. I am not aware. I don't know of another country in the 20th or 21st century that had so many, in the 20th century, let's say post-World War II, that had so many of the civilians kidnapped, including children. There were 30 kids there. There are like 15 people over the age of 75. I mean, this is they have babies. This is insane what they did. Okay. I'm not aware of other countries, with the exception of the US in 9/11, which is similar but different. You didn't have torture and rape and other stuff. Doesn't mean that it wasn't terrible, but you understand what I'm saying to you. The question here is, well, first of all, the answer is they're all bad choices. We need to get our people back. We need to cut off the head of the snake here. We have to remove this threat off of us. They're on our border. Okay. And we need to regain personal security, national security, and national deterrence. Strategic deterrence. We need to do these things. If not, we're finished. We live in a jungle here. That's the reality. Okay. And that's the reality. That's not fake news. It's not made up. Now, having said all that, I can't say that conquering the Gaza Strip is necessarily the correct way to go about doing this. I know that if we end up conquering the Gaza Strip, it's going to mean the following three things for sure. Number one, a huge amount of casualties of our soldiers. I mentioned already 15 soldiers have died in the last 24 hours, and we're still counting. Maybe a few have died since God forbid, since we started the Zoom. Because one was announced dead about an hour before we started the Zoom. Okay, and we're just starting this. So if we conquer the Gaza Strip, we're talking about probably Israeli casualties in the thousands. I'm talking about soldiers. We're probably talking about Gazan casualties in the tens of thousands. Okay? I'm not sure in terms of cost benefit, it's worth that while in terms of human life. Okay? I'm not sure. Can we succeed in dramatically degrading Hamas's offensive capabilities for a very long time and create real security for us in the South by using incursions, going in, going out, doing with very good intelligence, okay, and just hunting them and keep doing it for months on end? I don't know. Maybe that's the better way to do it. My heart is shattered for the captives and their families. And it's clear to me, the longer this goes on, the greater chances that some of those people are going to die, or maybe already have died. And we have a responsibility to bring these people back, bring them back alive. The country has that responsibility. That's what it is. It's part of the social contract. It's something very basic. And yeah, there. I think in the poll that I read today, and I apologize, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe in the poll I read today, I think something to the tune of half the Israelis were willing to, or slightly less than half, were willing to release all Palestinian prisoners, which are in the thousands. And a lot of them have blood on their hands, or like hardened terrorists that have killed people, okay, to swap them for the captives, just bring the captives back. Not all Israelis are for that. It's part of a national dilemma and a national debate that's going on over here. So we're in a very, very bad way, and all the armchair warriors and all the folks who were sitting in the academy in the ivory tower and telling us you shouldn't be doing this, and well, give us a better solution, keeping in mind that we've done several rounds and rounds of peace talks, and Israel made some very significant concessions to the Palestinians. Okay, the biggest ones in 2009, to which we never received an answer from the PA at the time, Mahmoud Abbas, the same guy who was sitting there in Ramallah today. So Never say never, but I don't have a good answer. The last thing I'll say, and I'm sorry I'm going on and on about this, Hamas is to blame for all the casualties on all sides. Hamas and the Iranians, they're to blame. We're doing what any country would or should do to protect itself and its people. And I don't say it with any kind of relish. Nobody's asking, is there anything that you can do from here, meaning here, I guess the US, that's where nobody's speaking from. So I'm being asked the question. I feel it's not fair for me, although for those of you who are American, I know there are plenty of people who are not Americans on this Zoom. For those of you who are American, I'm just as American as you are. I was born, bred, and raised in the United States. I'm a U.S. citizen. I'm a dual citizen, but I'm also a U.S. citizen. But I think me sitting here in Jerusalem, it's a little bit presumptuous. That's the right word for me to tell you what you can do. But I was asked the question, so I'm going to jump into the deep end of the pool, and please don't shoot me for that. Bad use of term. Okay. Okay. So here's the deal. First of all, it should be unacceptable I'm now speaking to the Americans because I don't know what to tell to the Europeans about this, if they're Europeans on this, or South Americans. I'm speaking out to Americans, maybe the North Americans, the Canadians as well. It should be unacceptable to all the Americans and Canadians on this Zoom, whether you're Jewish or otherwise, that Jewish students feel unsafe on college campuses, on university campuses. It should be unacceptable, okay, for any student to feel unsafe on a campus. And you could do something about that. You need to galvanize and organize, okay? It's a lot of money invested, okay, in these universities, in these colleges. There are a lot of people on the boards who are not happy, boards these places who are not happy about what's been going on. Okay, and there are a lot of alumni not happy, and they need to raise their voices. You know, get a lot of good lawyers on this as well. Start filming some of the incitement and some of the attacks. Go not just to the school, go to the local police, out them on the media. Okay, there are things you can do. I think it should be unacceptable. Okay, and generally speaking, the rise of it's not just the campus, the rise of anti-Semitism should be unacceptable. In a society where there is rise of anti-Semitism, okay, there's going to be the next step will be harm other people. Okay, and it's going to be the downfall of that democracy. Got to step up, whether you're Jewish or not Jewish, against that stuff. Okay, and Nomi, to your question, also there are plenty of non-Jews who are not happy in North America about the way Jews are being treated, and are also supportive of Israel. Reach out for allies; you'll find them. The year is not 1938; it's not 1945. The year is 2023, and we are not alone. We're not alone. It's not true. I'm not saying wishful thinking. I know we're not alone. Okay, one of the things that you should know is that within a week of this disaster, I reached out to a whole group of teachers that work for or with Classrooms Without Borders, all of them not Jewish. Okay, and said, let's put together a curriculum to explain this in the classroom. They all stepped up to the plate, gratis, worked, and we put out what seems to be a good curriculum that is being accepted by some of the public and private schools in Pittsburgh. And we're going to expand on that as well. Reach out for allies, you'll find them. Don't stand alone. You don't have to stand alone. Okay, there are a lot of people who are not opposed to us. And I think we need to recall that, remember that. The year is not 1945. All right. Bernie's asking if I read the Thomas Friedman article in the New York Times a few days ago regarding Pakistan and India and how they dealt with terror attacks. No, I do not, Bernie. The issue there was that India did not respond to the cross-border attack from Pakistan. They dealt with it in a different way. With all due respect, Israel is a tiny country. India is a huge country, as is Pakistan. they're both nuclear powers. The story there is very, very different. It's contextually not the same, and it's not very useful in my opinion for our situation. What I think the Friedman was talking about was more to the tune of what I was saying about doing incursions and not like incisive incursions and not a mass invasion or a mass siege. That's not going to be effective and be too much of a loss of life. Okay. Hamas's miles of tunnels. Many Israelis will die in this war, not to mention Palestinian civilians. Also, Israel will lose support as the toll mounts. Many people are asking, is this the correct reaction, whether it is in fact possible to get rid of Hamas? What is my response? Hi, Ronnie. Well, the underlying assumption behind what Ronnie is saying is that we're going to enter into the tunnels. I'm not sure that's the case, that we're going to enter into the tunnels. Now, if we assume that if we don't enter the tunnels, we cannot decapitate Hamas, I'm not sure you have to physically enter the tunnels to take care of the tunnels. This is the first thing. Okay. And I want to say that Israel has been aware of this whole tunnel strategy for quite some time. And I believe that we've been preparing some kind of strategy about how to deal with it. Okay. I do agree with Ronnie that the toll of casualties is going to rise, both on the Israeli side and the Palestinian side. The accepted common wisdom in Israel for the last 20 years or so, maybe more than that, was that Israeli society cannot stomach the loss of their kids, large casualties, large numbers of casualties in war. I think that what Hamas did on October 7th to 10th was they upended that assumption. Israel society feels right now so unsafe that we have to do what we have to do. I think that's the general sense in Israeli society. Having said that, I do believe, and I don't know what the magic number is, that there is some number of Palestinian deaths that is going to begin an avalanche of international pressure on Israel that's going to come from Israel's friends regarding the operation. And my sense is that Israel, in terms of support, has no more than several weeks to so-called get the job done. And I'm not sure that it's even possible in several weeks. And we may very well find ourselves going it alone for months. And that is not a good place to be. But I don't want to be a prophet. I don't know. It's a very good question about what we're going to be doing strategically there, and then what tactics will be used to achieve the strategy. It's still not clear, and obviously Israel's not telegraphing it, but it's not clear at this moment what it's going to look like. I'm sorry if that wasn't satisfactory. So Barbara's asking the question, how many rockets have been shot onto Israel from Gaza? The answer is around 8,500. Other countries, I don't know what the numbers are from Hezbollah, but it's something in, I don't know, maybe like 100 or something like that. And from the Houthis, it's been something like, less than 20. How many bombs has Israel used in the Gaza Strip? I don't know. I can tell you that we've used huge numbers, and the numbers are already competing dramatically with the amount of bombs that were dropped in Afghanistan by the U.S. in several years of fighting, and I think also I don't know about Iraq, but the numbers are very high. Those stats don't exist. It's not, how many kind of rockets I can tell you that's that, but I don't know how many bombs we've actually I don't know. There's no way of getting that information. What is the long-term solution? Well, based on some of the faces I see in front of you, I can use the term, that's the $64,000 question. What's the long-term solution? For 20 years, not because I'm prophetic, but because I'm a historian, for 20 years I've been saying the following. Unfortunately, when I take a look at modern history, about some very, very bloody conflicts between some very hateful rivals, that today we either can't even imagine them or they've simmered down to something that's, let's call it, respectable. What I found in almost all cases are the following two factors that created peace. One factor was that the warring parties became democracies. And it's interesting because we actually have one of the few axioms in international relations that's an axiom, that democracies don't fight against each other. Interesting. No wage war against each other. The second, of course, that's not our case over here. It's hard for me to envision that our rival or rivals are going to be democracies anytime soon. The second factor, and this is terrible what I'm going to say now, but this is the way it's played out historically, when enough blood has been shed mutually, and there's basically an exhaustion, that's typically when the sides sit down and begin to wage peace. And that's kind of what happened to Ireland. Not Ireland, but Northern Ireland, which again, that's kind of simmering, but it's not the biggest hotspot on the planet at this moment. So unfortunately, what I've been saying for the last 20 years regarding the conflict here is that when there's enough blood spilled on both sides, and there's exhaustion, that's when they may sit down with each other finally and hammer something out. The addendum to that is that I don't want myself or my children or my friends or my family to be part of that equation or that calculus. I live here. It's a horrible thing to think and say, but it appears that this is the route that we've been going. I think that we have to be honest in that there has definitely been a radicalization and a religious radicalization on both sides of this conflict. That does not bode well. That does not bode well. And it's hard for me right now to envision an equitable, long-term, peaceful solution. All choices are bad. And Hamas is not our only problem. Hamas is not our only problem. Not internally and not externally. So there are very, very big challenges facing Israel and facing our rivals, it must be said. And I don't see the solution around the corner. And I'm not sure that imposed solutions are going to work well either. So I'm sorry, I'm not optimistic, and I don't see that. I do not see that light at the end of the tunnel. David Green is asking me, do I think that much of what happened with Hamas was caused by Prime Minister Netanyahu's worry or focus on Iran and not Hamas? Okay. Well, it's a very good question. And it's a very complex answer. So let's give agency to Hamas, to Iran, and to Israel for a second. Evidently, Hamas, which declared in its founding charter in 1988 that its goal is to erase the Jewish state of Israel, and declared openly that it's anti-Semitic in its charter of 1988, meant every word they said. And I'm waiting for the right opportunity. I've been planning this for years. What they did was something that had been planned for years. Okay, so by their own admission, by the way, and also it's very clear. So this is number one. Number two, there are many analysts in the US, in Israel, many places that think that the approaching, so-called approaching Israeli-Saudi normalization under the aegis of the United States was something that Iran found particularly threatening, and as did the Palestinians at large, not just Hamas. Because if that had transpired, essentially what it would have meant was that Israel had succeeded in making peace with much of the Sunni Arab world without having peace with the Palestinians, without making concessions to the Palestinians. And so from a Palestinian perspective, yet again, they're being shunted aside by the international community, by the regional community, by the other Arab states. From the Iranian perspective, since Iran is fighting this kind of proxy war of Shiites against Sunnis, they themselves are not actually putting any skin into the game. They use Hezbollah, and they use all kinds of Shiites that are either in Iraq or in Syria, and they use the Houthis, okay, and now they're using Hamas as well, and so on and so forth, or they help Hamas. So, you know, Iran certainly saw this as threatening. So this is another piece over here. The issue with what happened from the Israeli perspective is multifaceted, and I'll just lay out briefly several of them. And I want to be very cautious and careful because the question was very political, and the answer has to be at least partially political. And I'm trying to be as balanced as possible. Number one, beyond a shadow of a doubt, there was a security and political concept that Hamas was comfortable with the status quo. And all of the bushels of money that Qatar was giving them every month, keeping them, solvent, and the fact that Israel kept increasing the numbers of Gazan laborers coming into Israel, which is good for the Gazan economy. These were keeping Hamas satisfied, and the Israeli policy, to be honest with you, declaratively, not secretly, in the last three governments, not just the present one, and two out of the last three governments were headed by Netanyahu, not the previous one, but two previous ones ago, and the present one. So three of them were headed by him. Their policy was to weaken the Palestinian Authority and to strengthen Hamas at its expense, to strengthen, quote unquote. So the concept obviously was quite erroneous. Yeah, it was a complete misreading. It was an intelligence misreading, and it was a political misreading of what Hamas's plans really were. Okay, that's something that's very, very important to say. So we had a conceptual snafu, both political and security. There was an intelligence failure, a pinpoint one, okay, because there was activity taking place in the weeks leading up to it and the day before. There was a security failure based on complacency and arrogance that didn't array the military properly, because even with the intelligence snafu, if we'd been arrayed properly, we could have stopped this fairly quickly with relatively little loss of life on our side. I truly believe, I know that. It's not that I believe that, I know that. We simply not arrayed properly. For political reasons, weapons were taken from a lot of those communities and were transferred to other communities in the West Bank, settler communities. 2 battalions were moved away from the Gaza envelope to the West Bank, to Judea and Samaria, because there was rumblings there, and some people wanted to visit some Jewish religious sites there and need a lot of security protection. There are other things that were going on there in terms of priorities. And we have to be very honest. We got played, and they knew us backwards and forwards from A to Z. They knew us, Hamas knew us much, much, much better than we knew them. Much better. What they did deliberately with the atrocities and the filming of them shows just how much they understand the Israeli Jewish psyche. To a point. Because they still haven't figured out that we are not foreign crusader colonists. We're indigenous that came back, and we are very, very well rooted in the country. Historically, okay, very well rooted historically and emotionally and spiritually. We ain't going nowhere. So they also misread us, and they continue to do so. That was a long answer, short question, and I hope that I managed to answer at least partially. Okay, Bob is asking about the fact that Allah was made at the bombing of the hospital in Gaza, but you haven't heard of the fact that Israeli hospitals were bombed here. Why do I think that's the case? And would it help the press coverage? I don't think it interests. Look, I'm not sure that you knew that there were 8,500 rockets or missiles shot at us. Okay, that's not what's in the press outside of Israel. Is what Israel's doing in the Gaza Strip. Has to be said. In Israel, the Israeli press is not showing the humanitarian disaster in the Gaza Strip. Let me say that sentence again. The Israeli press, we don't see here, okay, dead babies, dead children, civilians. We're not seeing that on our newsfeed. We're seeing a lot less of it than what you're seeing in your newsfeed. Yeah, this is what's called orientation, and how different news feeds or different presses are oriented, whether it's politically or interest or what have you. I guess it's not interesting news that Israeli hospital was also hit, but again, nobody was killed because we were proactive, and we moved people out of the way, and we moved people into secure areas, and so on and so forth. Kate's asking me, do I think it was a good decision to bomb the refugee camp? Okay, but Israel stated it was a target, one Hamas commander. Actually, that's what you got in your news feed. Well, what came into our news feed was it wasn't the refugee camp, it was specifically a Hamas a position, and 50 Hamas were killed, together with the commander there. And it relates also to shooting that emanated from there onto our troops. Okay, we're shooting back at it. It wasn't, it's that's very interesting to show the difference in the newsfeed. And I don't really know, to be honest with you, sitting here, which is right. It's clear that part of our bombing collapsed the tunnels there, and this raised an interesting question: are there civilians in the tunnels aside from captives, or just Hamas fighters? I don't know the answer to that question. None of us know right now. The assumption in the press abroad was that there are civilians down there. But the assumption in the Israeli side, because I think we are physically there, okay, on the ground, okay, was that the people killed there were Hamas. I don't know where the truth lies over there. If I'm being perfectly blunt and honest, I simply don't know. In terms of being a good decision, Israel has to take out now as many Hamas heads, leaders, political or military, as possible, as fast as possible, as much as possible. This is the task at hand. There's going to be collateral damage. There shouldn't be, but there's going to be. Innocent people should not die, but they're going to. All of our choices are bad. And yes, we need to take out these people, not the innocent people. We take out the bad people. And they're embedded, we're using the innocent people as human shields. And there's no way around it. We're stuck in this situation. The alternative being not to go after them is that they're maintaining their offensive capacities, and we're gonna find ourselves in a situation in the future again. Can't live this way. So I don't see another solution. Rachel is asking, and this, by the way, is going to be my second to last question I'm going to take because we're almost an hour and a half into this. Do I agree that the mission is to convert the world to Islam? If Rachel is asking me, do I think the mission of Hamas is to convert, or is Islam's mission? Since I don't know the specifics there, let me put the following out here. Hamas's declared mission is that Palestine, from the river to the sea, that includes Israel, will be an Islamic republic. That will be an Islamic country ruled by Sharia law, by Islamic law. Okay, that's number one. Hamas, being part of the Muslim Brotherhood, wants to see the whole world at the end of the day also Islamicized, not necessarily by the sword, by the way of the sword. But one that has to say something very, very basic, folks. Islam, like Christianity, by the way, is a missionizing faith. From an Islamic perspective, at the end of the day, I'm not talking about by force. At the end of the day, everybody has to accept the correct faith. In Christianity, at the end of the day, everybody has to accept Jesus. It's not to be by the sword. These are missionizing faiths that are universal faiths. That means that they believe that everybody and they has to become their faith or accept their faith. Judaism, by the way, and I'm not making a critical judgment call here. I'm just saying what is. Judaism is not a universal faith. There is no end goal that everybody becomes Jewish. We don't missionize, and we don't believe that everybody has to become Jewish at the end of the day. I think that Judaism does believe that everybody should become monotheistic at the end of the day, okay, but not by the sword for sure. And we're not converting people. We're kind of a tough club to join, depending upon which flavor of Judaism you are. But we're not a missionizing faith, and that's in contrast to Christianity and Islam. Okay, so I don't know if the answer was useful or not. I'm going to do my last question now, just because we're about an hour and a half into this. Okay, Julie, why is there more of an uproar that Arab countries are refusing to take Palestinians in? The Arab countries didn't take in the Palestinian refugees in 48, and they don't see this as their problem. And Arab countries have always been supportive of the Palestinians. It's part of lip service, but not in reality. I think a bigger question, not that your question was a bad one, but another question, not a bigger question, should be, inasmuch as Egypt borders on the Gaza Strip, what is Egypt's responsibility in ameliorating and alleviating the humanitarian suffering of the Gazans, generally speaking, and in this war in particular? What is their piece going to be in creating some kind of safe, peaceful environment on their back door as well? Okay, listen, great questions. There are more questions coming in. I think an hour and a half is a lot of time for many of you to be on Zoom. I want to thank everybody for joining, and I'm going to pass over the baton to my friend and colleague, Kate.
Thank you, Avi. If I've not met you yet, I'm Kate Lekatowicz, Classrooms Without Borders' new Education Programs Director. As we conclude this Zoom, we kindly ask that you consider sharing your experience with your friends, your family, or congregation. Let them know that in the coming weeks, we'll be offering 2 compelling Zoom sessions. Avi will be hosting one weekly, and we're honored to have esteemed scholar John T. Blackman leading another. We know that these upcoming sessions will continue to inspire thought-provoking discussions and meaningful learning. After this Zoom, you'll receive a follow-up email, which will include a survey and a link to the recording. If you're so inclined and able, I'll also drop a link to donate to Classrooms Without Borders into the chat. Your support enables us to continue offering community programming at no cost to our audience. I'm not done yet, just a second. Once again, thank you for being part of our community and for your dedication to our shared mission. We look forward to seeing you in our future meetings and continuing this journey of enlightenment together. Stay safe and take care. Thank you, everybody.